Welcome back to the Driveway Beers podcast with Mike and Alex. As always, we appreciate you listening. Please rate us on all the podcast platforms. Like, subscribe, comment, share wherever else you're listening, and enjoy the show. All right, welcome back to another show. We appreciate you listening. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, and share wherever you're listening to this episode. I want to thank Adam Chubbuck with Douglas Realty in Pasadena. That's techmd.com. Real estate market, especially in the new year. To be honest with you, that any houses that go up on the market seem to come off real quick as usual. So you need an experienced real estate agent to help you out through this. So go to techmd.com, contact Adam. And if you haven't checked out his social media stuff, it's pretty funny. He does some really good videos on there. Want to welcome back Jeremy. Jeremy's been doing some other stuff.
Yeah,
but he's back with us for this episode. Mike's here with me. No, don't say hi. Don't worry about
Hola.
it. It's like the dead air. It's like crap. So we've got this is going to be a different topic that we haven't hit on before. We've talked about some mental health stuff, and I guess it's kind of in that lane a little bit. But so recently, Jeremy lost his grandfather. And I had talked to you about what was going on with your grandfather for last year or so. And I'm not gonna say like I knew something was coming, but even you knew you knew that it was winding down.
I mean, so he had dementia. And it's odd because my grandmother, his wife, just to keep it on that side of the family, she had dementia for 8 years. I mean, and literally for 6 of those years, she was a zombie, just there with her mouth open, like just breathing heavily, not making any signs. She'd blink. That's the only reason you knew she was really alive, but it's just kind of a hard thing to go through. My grandfather was still very coherent. The one thing that happens with dementia is that you kind of revert back to childhood. And he had been telling us stories about going to see his dad. His dad had been dead for 50 years, so we were kind of waiting for this day to come. And it's been like 3 years of, 5 days at the assisted living facility. So much so that we know everybody's name on the unit that he's on. And my mom still goes back and visits those other people now. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really tough thing to go through. The one really odd thing, if you haven't gone through something like this, especially the lengthy thing, and you're essentially waiting for someone to die, it becomes such an odd feeling because you're better off and they're better off if they pass because they're in pain, how your life is, but you obviously don't want those things to happen. So it's a big catch-22. Yeah.
And for those that have listened for a while, my dad passed in 2020. And we've talked about like some of the issues that I've had kind of not moving on, but just kind of dealing with that in the past. And then we've also talked about Mike's parents passing. When we talked about that, we mostly talked about kind of not settling the estate kind of deal. Like we talked about it more from that angle and all of the issues that kind of arise from that. And we never really got into like how we dealt with the grief of losing a loved one. And I thought this would probably be a good episode to do. And not that you haven't lost someone before, but when you brought it up, it was kind of like, okay, it seems to be a fresh topic.
Mm-hmm.
And like in general, like I know when my dad passed, it was kind of it was strange because one, my mom, like I had to make sure she was all right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And me and my brother, like ever since he passed, we've always tried to make sure she was okay. And we've always kind of measured our responses and reactions around her based on how she was feeling with it. But I don't think I myself have been able to properly grieve his loss, even in 4 years. It's almost like if I grieve, then I'm going to put that grieving onto her. And I don't want to do that because she's having a very rough time with it all.
I fully understand that too. Like what you're saying makes total sense to me, in grieving for someone else and trying to trying to be the rock when everybody else is and everybody else is crying, and you're trying to keep everybody's spirits up. And we just had the first, Christmas without him. So that was a little odd for my family there. And I purposely went out to my aunt's house on Christmas because, all of his daughters were going to be there, all my aunts and my mom. And it was just kind of, I don't know, it was just nice to be around family and something that you would typically want to be around and have him there.
And we've kind of had a little bit of the opposite with my mom, just because. So my dad was big into Christmas, right? And he was all into the grandkids and all that kind of stuff. Like he was the one that enjoyed it the most. And my mom is now having a hard time with that because she knew my dad loved Christmas so much. So now it's almost hard for her to enjoy it without him being there. And so it's like, and not that I'm tempering it when she's there, but it's almost like I don't want to say something wrong that will kind of set her off. Like, and not set her off. Like she doesn't go like, she doesn't have like anger issues, but like I don't want to make her cry over something on a day that's supposed to be a happy day. Although Mike would probably say it's a sad day. So Mike's got a different take, especially about the holidays. Because you lost your dad close to Christmas,
so my dad passed away on December 29th. The last day I spoke to him was Christmas Day. So it kind of, it really, and my dad died from lung cancer, which a lot of, you think, oh, that's going to be drawn out. You have time to prepare. But he was diagnosed on December 8th, and 21 days later, he was dead. So it was a really quick, he was diagnosed with stage 4. And, it was kind of like no one really, doctors were missing it. And what kind of had it was when he was having trouble eating because the tumor had pressed against his esophagus. So, and you always have guilt issues like, well, I should have been down there. Well, when someone says lung cancer, you think, okay, well, we've got, even the doctors were saying 6 months or so, so it's not like you think, oh, well, okay, I got time. Let me go to my in-laws for Christmas and then we'll come back and I'm like, no. So there's like guilt issues there. So the whole holiday is kind of, the whole season almost is kind of just tempered by those memories. And then my mother, now she passed away in March, but we kind of recognized that something wasn't right on December 29th. So the whole thing's kind of like, ruins the whole holiday thing. And, like Alex, you're saying with your dad, like my dad was the one that was into the grandkids. We only had one at the time, the oldest, and he was 10 months old, but he would have been all about my kids. And my mother was more standoffish when it came to the kids. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, she liked them, like they're little kids, but she wasn't like, my dad would come, because he was still working after he retired. He was doing consulting work. So when he was in DC, he'd just pop in like unannounced, unexpected, to see his grandson. And, my mother never did that. In fact, after my father passed away, she never once came to my house again. So
that's how my dad was the one that in his 70s would get on the floor playing with the baby, playing with the kids. But like, he's the one, like, I remember like before my first daughter was born, he actually bought the Disney Princess Castle that made like the firework noise or whatever, because he would like, so it's strange. So his first 3 grandkids were boys. Well, then my brother had his 4th, which was his daughter, a girl. She's about 6 months older than my oldest daughter. And then my youngest came around. So then not that like my dad was always like, he got along with the boys in a way, but when it came to the girls, he was like putty, right?
Oh yeah.
Like he became a big puddle of mush. Mm-hmm. And it was hilarious though, because here's this ex-military guy and he's just walking around with babies and stuff and whatnot. But my mom, on the other hand, no, my mom was exactly like your mom. It was like, oh, there's a baby. Okay.
Yeah. The baby can stay over there and I'll enjoy it from afar.
Right. So I think for her, it's almost like harder to interact with the kids because she knew that my dad loved to interact with the kids. It's almost like she doesn't want to do something that he would do because it reminds her of him. Right. It brings her to a bad place and whatever it is. I mean, Jeremy, with you, I mean, you kind of lost him fairly close to the holidays. I mean, were you able to still enjoy the holidays, or are now the holidays kind of tainted for you because of that?
I don't know, because again, I haven't. For me, I haven't fully processed it, and I know it. Like I find myself, I was telling my therapist, I was driving to work, listening to a song that had nothing to do with my grandfather. I don't know if there was something in the lyrics, something that sparked it. Started bawling my eyes out and couldn't stop thinking about him. But I did his eulogy at his funeral, and it's just kind of odd too, because like he was the sweetest man, and depending on the relationship you have with someone, I could just see it in his eyes. He was so scared to die. And but at the same extent, we all knew it was coming, and he was in constant pain. Like his arthritis was off the charts. He had one of his arteries to his heart was completely clogged, or backed up or whatever. They couldn't do anything with it. It was blocked. So we knew he was going to die from heart disease or dementia at some point. And I think it all came full circle. And it sounds like with his immune system that he may have actually died from something more similar to the bird flu or pneumonia.
One of the things I've always said this: people that are not in favor of assisted death or assisted suicide have never watched someone go through the death process. So, for example, like my dad had colon cancer, and essentially he got to the point where he couldn't eat. So it was essentially you're having someone starve to death.
I had that happen with my great grandmother. We watched it for a week. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. And again, I don't know what the right answer is for like assisted suicide and things like that, but there's no doubt at the end of life. And when you know it's the end of life, that's way more humane to do something like that than it is to just watch them starve to death.
There's no doubt in my mind that, and it would be an extremely tough decision, and you need someone that's basically I don't know what the term is, like tough as nails, to basically say, okay, we're going to put this loved one on a morphine drip so that they can pass away quietly and painlessly. Yes. Or whatever they do. I don't know.
We do it for our animals. I mean, we can't do it for humans.
Does say we're a Dr. MD DDS, whatever it is. I don't have that medical knowledge to know which the right cocktail to let someone just drift off into sleep. But I'd say probably 2 weeks before, the person can't go to doctor's visits, they can't get out of the house. You know it's coming, and rather than have them suffer in such a way that they do pass away like that, because I'll be honest with you, there is a lot of guilt, at least with me, that there was nothing else I could do to like, ease the pain a little bit, right? Not to take a line out of Field of Dreams, but
yeah.
Like for example, like I know there was one thing, like my dad hated Percocet, right? Hated it. So I ended up getting this man who had never used marijuana in his life before. I ended up getting him some marijuana THC liquid or whatever the liquid, it's like a little drink.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped him more with pain than the Percocet did, but at least it kept him also lucid.
Yeah.
Like he felt like he could still be himself. But I think for any, like, and I don't know if I was pro assisted suicide or not, but after seeing that, I am 100% in favor of it.
Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
My dad was similar. My dad was vehemently anti-drugs. And did we lose Jeremy?
No, I'm here.
No, he's there. We just can't hear him.
Oh,
you can't.
So I'm gonna try and reconnect the speaker.
So I'll
keep going.
I'll keep going. But he was vehemently anti-drugs. He worked for U.S. Customs for his entire adult life, so that was kind of his. And he wasn't like a drug zealot or anything, but he just was anti-drug. And my sister is into that lifestyle. So when she found him, she brought marijuana to him, and it's when he smoked cigarettes his entire life. That's what killed him. But he didn't want to smoke. He was smoking marijuana. And so she ended up making him weed butter essentially so you could, like a tincture or something, so she could spread it on toast or something like that for him. So, but yeah, he went to that, and he didn't really find any relief from it. But
did it make him like at least feel a little bit better?
Like I think whatever she got him, he maybe it was the wrong strain or whatever. I don't know a lot about it, but it could have been it was just the wrong thing that it made him feel out of it or drowsy. So, he wasn't that into it. So, she was there for that part. I wasn't there for that. But
was she just in the room like smoking with him?
Well,
pass.
So my dad put the marijuana in his humidor, and after he died, my sister's like, no, well, he won't be eating this anymore. So she took it back. But whatever.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
We got you back. I just had to plug the speaker back in.
No, it's all right. No, one of the things that I was saying was, just obviously getting to the end with my grandfather. And one of the reasons that, I talked about it so much is that I took care of him for 3 years. I mean, 5 days a week going to the hospital and trying to spend at least an hour waking up early on Saturdays and Sundays to get all my work done for football, to drive over just to make sure I get home in time to watch the games. And then all of a sudden he dies. And then my first day back at work, I usually take a different way home because I go to the facility to see him. And then I was like, oh man, I'm not going that way. It's like, what am I doing with my life now that I get all this time back? But it's sad, man, because again, until you've dealt with something like it, until you've processed it, and I don't think I've fully done that. And it sounds like even with you, Alex, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but you're still working on that. And that's kind of a part of life and figuring out how to move past some of this stuff. And I mean, the holidays always bring back those memories, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah, for me, so, and the only other person I can really compare to is my brother. But he processes death a completely different way than I do. So like, even for two people who lose the same person, the grieving process is not the same. Like for me, my dad and I, like we played golf together. Like my dad became more of a friend as I got older, like the biggest supporter, more of a friend. But also someone like, if I had a question on something, like he would be the first person I would probably text and ask like, hey, this is the situation. What would you do? Because my dad was also much more level-headed than I was. Like my initial reaction, almost anything, is to tell people to fuck themselves right and left and center. And he would be like, well, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe there's a different way to look at this. And so it was almost like, you had a professional, I don't want to use the word life coach because I think that word sucks.
It's stupid.
Especially when you see the life coaches out there who don't have any life experience. I think it's a horrible term, but I guess a mentor in life, right?
Well, it's also someone that's been there and done it.
Correct.
That watched you screw all kinds of shit up as you were coming up and was like, told you so. And then who's made the same mistakes himself. Yeah. They can kind of say like, tell you what, to avoid the shoals and stuff like that. But my dad and I, it's funny because the relationship you have with your parents, like you're a little kid and they're the greatest thing on earth, and then you become a teenager and they're the absolute worst thing on earth. And then you go to college, like, yeah, and then when my son was born, it was like, oh wow, this dude's actually kind of cool. And we have since he traveled so much, he was really into airplanes, and I'm into airplanes too. So like we had that connection, and then it's sad now, but it's the end. Kind of like what Jeremy was saying with his, when he was driving home and took the wrong route or the route to go see his grandfather. Like every now and then something will pop up about an airplane or something that my dad would be interested in, and I'll reach for my phone to call him, and then I remember that he's not here anymore. But it's for that split second, for that fraction of a second, they're still there, and it's almost nice in a way because you had that. It's probably less than a second. It's just that little tiny moment of time where everything's normal and they're still there before you remember, like, oh crap. Now, when that happened soon after his death, it was hard. Mm-hmm. Now I get a smile because it's like, okay, for that second, and then you remember something good, or hey, he'd really be interested in that, or we would talk about this for whatever. But, same with my mom. Like I would think of, oh, I got to call my mom and tell her about XYZ, or how long do you put such and such in the oven for? She'd know. So I call, and usually her answer was till it's done. But so I go to call her, like, wait, I can't call my mom. But for that fraction of a second, she was still there. So it's kind of nice for that time.
Yeah. I can't speak to you guys in losing your parents. I still have both of my parents, although it's a constant worry with both of them having health issues later in life. But my grandfather was kind of a unique relationship, as he was the custodian at my high school. So whenever I'd have basketball, I'd go to he'd always have honey buns for me. So now when I go through the grocery store, I see these honey buns. They were 45 cents. He'd give me $1. I'd keep the dime and buy 2 of them and house them before practice. And then the other thing, like with his wife, my grandmother on that side, I wasn't fond of. She was just an awful, awful woman. But I would always go over to their house because I loved being around him. Like just a weird, funny guy. And anytime someone spells my name wrong, it makes me think of him, because in my 45 years of life, he's never spelt my name the same way, and he's always spelt it wrong. So somehow I's, O's, E's. I think one time there was a U in there. Like it's unbelievable that he could not spell my name correctly.
If he adds a T to the end with a U,
yeah,
that's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So it's funny that Mike, that you mentioned that every once in a while, it's almost as if they're still there because you forget that they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about 4 years removed from, I think March will be year 4, like total 4 years. There's 2 things I'm surprised about. One, that feeling is now here, because immediately, no, it's like you're always aware that they're not there.
Yeah.
But now it's almost like, oh, right, can't make that call or whatever it is. It is. I think that for whatever reason, that's kind of nice though. Like it's nice not always just having the they're not there feeling. Some of the good memories are now working their way back in. Because for me, a lot of the memories that I had were at the very end, where he just looked like he was just wasting away to nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And so like it takes a long time for those visuals to kind of fade into the background and the good visuals to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also interesting, like with Jeremy, when you talked about guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, so with my dad at the end, there is a ton of guilt there that I didn't go visit more often. Like, why didn't I go every single day? Or because he lived right down the road. So why didn't I go every day? And I think a lot of it was, for me, I was protecting myself. Like I was thinking more of myself. I was trying to protect myself because I didn't want to have those images of the way he was at the end versus like, I thought maybe if I didn't see him, then I could keep the good images still. Right. And then 2, I didn't want my daughters to remember him that way either. So, because they were still really young. Now, my youngest probably remembers more from pictures, but my oldest probably remembers more from actual interaction. So I didn't want her just to see him at the very, very end, because I was afraid that would be the images that stuck with her the most. Like I thought they would stick with me the most. But also then it's like the guilt of, okay, well, was it just him and my mom hanging out there? But I knew he had like visitors coming in and whatnot. Like it was weird because it was kind of coming along. A lot of his old friends and whatnot were flying in to say their goodbyes, which was kind of also sad at the same time. Because like I was seeing someone, like as they came in, I would see them and like, I know why you're here. It's you're not greeting them with happiness. You're greeting them with, okay, I know why you're here. And all right, you might want to do what you got to do. And, but I don't, so there's a lot of guilt there. And then of course there's the guilt I have about maybe not being there or doing as many things from my mom at that point. Now my mom had help, but, obviously she was grieving throughout the whole process too. And like you said, like you want to be the rock for someone, but at the same point, and I don't think not everyone is built to be that. Right. And I definitely didn't think I was built to be that. My brother more so. Right. Mm-hmm. And not so much me. But it was very strange because this was probably the first time I'd actually gone through it. Now I've lost grandparents before, but this felt a lot different. And I was close with my dad's mother long before she passed. I mean, I was close with her my whole life. But then my mom's two parents, they also passed, and they were all in their like the 80s and 90s. My grandmother was in her hundreds, but I didn't feel as close to them as I did to my father. So it's like, I guess the grieving process depends on your relationship with the person, obviously, but this was probably the first person that passed that I had this type of fondness and relationship with. And I'm like I said, I'm 4 years later, and it's still, I don't know what the end result is supposed to be. Like no one tells you like how you're supposed to end up feeling, right? Like when do you know the grieving process is over? I mean, I don't
know that it ever ends.
Right. I don't think I'm done with it.
Yeah.
But like you said, I don't know if it's ever going to end.
Well, you brought up something that I think, and sorry if I'm cutting you in here, Mike, but like the messed up thing is like you feel this amount of survivor's guilt. Now, I felt it tremendously with Mo, and I feel like that's one of the reasons why I went to see my grandfather 5 times a week. You know, he was the guy, whenever he called you, you never picked up the phone because you couldn't get off the effing phone with him. And now I'm dying to go see him, and I would love to get one of those phone calls today. But like I had all that survivor's remorse with Mo that I could have done more sooner. I could have taken him to this place. I did so much for him, and it still doesn't feel like enough. And I don't know that I fully let go of everything. I know my wife and I went on this concert out in Denver and Red Rocks, and I'm not saying it was like some spiritual moment or whatever, but I kind of felt like I let a lot of it go that night. And I don't know, it's just sad because like you can't convince yourself that you did as much as you could, or you even went above that, because you're so guilty that they're gone and that you feel like you could do more.
Yeah, I think you're always going to feel that. And when I look back on my parents, like first of all, when my dad retired, they moved to the Outer Banks, so it wasn't like they were close. They were 6 hours away, so it wasn't they weren't physically close. But then you feel like oh well, I had I could have done this, but I also had a 10-month-old baby at home too, and a job and all this other stuff, and work would have given me off. That's no problem there, but I think even had I spent every moment at his bedside, I still would have thought I didn't do enough. So I think that's probably a normal feeling, because you're not superhuman. You can't save them. You can't bring them back. So, it's always going to be that, well, maybe if I had done this, if I had taken another day, had I driven down, had I done this, but, I think that's just us beating ourselves up over it.
Well, all three of us have mentioned about our own mental health issues, right? Yeah. So I don't think we all have the issue with the rational thought being the dominant thought in our brains. Like the irrational is usually the louder one. So the irrational thought is, I could have done more. And the irrational thoughts are the ones that aren't allowing you to see the reality of, yes, I did do enough. And unfortunately, I mean, because someone can tell you all the time, it's like someone telling you, if you don't feel like you're good enough, then someone says you are good enough. Until your brain decides to get on board with that, you're not going to think that way.
Yeah.
The irrational is always winning. Now, I don't know if this is, it's someone, and I don't want to use the word a healthy mental health, like someone who has good mental health. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if people like that, if the rational thought always overtakes the irrational.
For me, when both my parents died, I automatically go into like 100% rational thought. It's a strange thing when it comes to not the grieving process later, but I almost completely go into 100% handling business. What needs to get done. Okay, this is almost like a checklist. All these things need to get done. So when my father died, we immediately got into, my mother didn't want to have a funeral for him. And I said, all these people that my dad knew, if you don't want to have a funeral for yourself, then write it down. And she actually did. But for dad, you know that there are all these people, because when it happened, all these people started calling, visiting, you know, because he worked around the world, like from all over the world are sending cards and calling and emails and all kinds of things. So we couldn't, and he also, like, sometimes the guy was like a saint, like he volunteered to teach people how to speak English. So the entire Spanish community of Manio and the Outer Banks showed up at the funeral. So it's almost like they do it both in English and Spanish.
Today's a colonizer.
Yeah. But so I got down to it. I just buried myself in, I guess, the minutia of legal aspects of these, and I think that was more of a cover. It was more of a distraction. You know, with my mom, it was handling the estate and the house and burying yourself in business so that you don't have to deal with the emotional side of it. Later on, though, it all comes back really hard.
My mother did that. So what she did was, so when my dad passed, they had a house in Florida, and they had the condo up here. And and it was during COVID too, so it was kind of an odd time. But she ended up renovating the Florida house. She ended up renovating the condo up here. I mean, and this took like a year and a half, 2 years. She then sold the house in Florida and moved up here full time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think she actually started any actual grieving for almost 2 years after the fact, because she just kept herself busy.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. This is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're right. I mean, like, it's almost like in order for your brain to not start the grieving process, it puts you in work mode.
Oh yeah.
Like, let me get all of this done. Yeah. And then when it's done, maybe I'll start to think about this a little bit. I definitely see that. And I'm sure that's how it is. Was like, for me, I didn't have any work to do. Like, I didn't go that route, but my mom did. So like, I could see how certain people do that. Right. And I think it just delays the process of grieving a little bit, but I don't know. I guess we should have had a shrink on for this show, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Well, are we shrinks according to our bio on Twitter?
We are a PhD.
Okay.
So does that count?
Doctor of philosophy.
We are a DR. I mean, that's a psychologist, right?
Psychiatrist, doctor.
Psychiatrist. So, I mean,
as a medical doctor.
PhD, is that pretty horny dads? Is that what?
Yes.
Very nice.
that works like not to the Twitter world. We got a degree in something, but to everyone else, yes, that is what it means.
Yeah, and again, it's funny, just going back to the grief thing. Now experiencing the worst thing is a child's death. And I had to experience that twice in such a short period of time. Not for myself, but like with Mo and one of my best friends' kids died from leukemia, and there's just. The hardest part is, like, there's a lot of times where I feel like I have the words to say to people, the right words, or at least trying to get them to laugh in those moments. There's nothing you can say to someone that just lost their child.
No,
nothing.
No, and it just goes against the natural order of things. We are not supposed to bury our kids.
Yeah.
And it's that's not the way it works. So I don't know how to respond, and so I recently I went to a wake. A friend of mine passed away suddenly. I know his wife and family, extended family, and then a lot of people from work that knew him. And it's like, but you go and you see these, his wife was amazing. She's there. And I think it's one of those things where she was distracting herself by being so busy. And then it's, but you walk up to him and he's like, how you doing? That's what I say to everyone. Whenever I meet someone, I say, hey, how you doing? And how you doing? Shitty? Like, that's right. You know what I mean? Like, how you doing? Oh, how do you think I'm doing? I'm standing at my husband's wake. What do you think I'm doing? So yeah, it's hard on that side, but with a child, like, now his father, this person, he passed away, and then his sister, his dad was still there. So, he had to bury two kids, which,
it's interesting. Like, of course you just say, I'm sorry for your loss. Right. Or you say, how you doing? Or whatever it is. Right. That person on the other end of that is just like, I'm fucking shitty.
Yeah.
Why the fuck are you asking me this?
But and having been on the receiving side of that with my dad, was all these people saying, I was just glad they were there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, they're just glad that you're there. So I don't think it matters what you say. You go and be like, let's go Caps.
Right.
For mine, feel free to say that if you want. They're just glad you're there. So I think we worry about that more than other people do. The receiver does. So,
and you, Jeremy, you talked about survivor's guilt a little bit. So I've got an interesting story. So for those, have we mentioned the cancer on this?
Mine. I think so.
Probably a few years ago.
Yeah.
All right. So when I was 29, within, let's see, April-ish, May. So about 6 months after I got married, we found out I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, which for anyone who knows about that, it's a very curable form of cancer.
Is that what Mario Lemieux had?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's Hodgkin's and there's non-Hodgkin's, whatever. It's a blood cancer. It is what it is. So I had horrible back pain. Couldn't lift my shoulder or my arm above like my shoulder height. They thought it was a back issue, like a compressed disc. They did a CT scan. Luckily went up just high enough. They saw an enlarged lymph node. The radiologist guy was like, "Hey, would you mind going back in the machine real quick? I just want to check something out." He does. He goes up even further up to my neck. And that's when they saw it. So we caught it by chance, right? But at that point, it was stage 4. It was in my bones. It was in my back, my neck, my chest, 2 quadrants of my chest. It was everywhere. But it's still very highly curable, obviously. I'm here.
Right.
But so I would go and I would get chemo at the place. Like, you have to go there, and they've got a bunch of rooms and stuff, and they hook you up, and they put the needle in your chest because that's where you got your port and whatever. And you're sitting there and you're going through treatments. And of course, people are walking by to go to their room, or sometimes you're in a share. Some of them are shared rooms. Sometimes you get a private room, and you're there. And sometimes you see like a teenager or a kid, and you're just like, holy shit. And then when you find out you're going to come through, and you find out like one of the kids did not, the survivor's guilt that you have, even from a kid you didn't even know, is just like even when you were talking about Mo on the radio and whatnot, I'm just like, how the fuck was it that, whatever this universe is, it didn't take out a 29-year-old adult, but instead decides to take a 13-year-old kid or 13, 14-year-old kid. And to me, that didn't make any sense. And there were some nights I would talk to my wife, and I was like, maybe me getting it means that maybe there's a finite number of cases of cancer. And so maybe me getting it meant that a kid or someone else, or one of my nephews or someone else, wouldn't get it. And that would kind of be like how I kind of moved through the world at that point. But then I would hear, you see those St. Jude commercials, and the kids are on there, and it's just heart-wrenching. You're like, why does that kid have to get it rather than me? And so there's a huge survivor guilt problem.
Well, I mean, you said we talked about mental health, and I mean, I'm not shy about talking. I tried to kill myself this past year, and it's a really difficult thing to look at people that are sick or that are struggling and don't want to die, and you almost took away the most precious thing that you have. I don't know, like there's a lot of guilt there, and it still hits me that when I see people that are sick or struggling or lose someone, hell, even when people lose their pets, because I don't even know how the hell I'm going to react when my dogs go. There's guilt. There's that grief that goes along with it. And when you compile all of it together, it can make for a really shitty time. Like there's a lot of bad things that come from that.
That was one of the reasons why I didn't initially want to get a dog. I'm like, it's basically a rental. I mean, you're getting it for what? Like, even the longest dogs, what do they live for? Like 15 years?
Yeah, they're
most times you're getting it like 8 to 12.
Yeah,
you're literally starting a relationship knowing you're going to have to outlive. You're going to outlive it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if that I don't know what the right word for that is, but it's like not narcissist. It's nihilist. I don't know whatever the was istics or isms is, but that, I mean, it's like you're entering into a relationship. isn't going to last and you're going to be the survivor.
Right. Yeah. You know that, you're going to love this animal.
Yeah.
And, that's, I never thought about it that way because I just got a puppy.
Right.
So.
See, but I guess I look at it the other way is like, so my wife and I, we always adopt dogs, and, there might be a period after our 2 dogs are gone that we take a small break, but I'm always going to want to have dogs in the house. Like, there's so many animals out there that need to be adopted. So like, that's something we'll keep doing. And, I'll look at some of these memories we've had, because it's so weird for me. When I was at my lowest in my depression and walking in, the one thing I knew is when I walked into my bedroom and my dog was there, she was going to lose her mind. So happy to see me, like she hadn't seen me in 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And I can leave the room for 5 minutes and she still does it when I come back. I don't know if she has like a goldfish mind or something, but it's interesting. And you said something too when you were talking about your cancer treatment. Like, my dad went through chemo for prostate cancer. And it was one of the funnier things, like conversations that we kind of had, because he came to me and he goes, I'm not doing that shit again. Chemo. Nope. He said, I'll go the other route. I'll die. And I'm going, why? He started talking about it. He goes, the only other option, chemo made me feel so awful. The only other option, there's a chance I couldn't get a hard on for the rest of my life. And I'm going, you're still using your dick at your age? Like, is that like, am I going to be jerking off when I'm 70? Like, what's the deal here? Like, when does that stop? Like,
that's actually an interesting conversation, because like, I've thought about if there was a relapse, would I do it again?
Mm-hmm.
I know. All right. I know the answer has to be yes, because I got 2 young kids.
Yes.
You got to at least try, right? But if the kids weren't around and I wasn't married and I had done it once already, the answer would probably be no.
Yeah.
You just don't feel good. And I'm sure like the one I had wasn't the worst one, but you're always nauseous. Shit's always coming out of your ass, and you never feel normal throughout the process. So it's just like, do you really want to go through that again?
Nausea and shit sounds like that. Yeah. Like, I could take a head cold, I can take a sinus thing, I could take pain, physical injuries and stuff like that. But having to like nausea is just the worst to me. So,
well, it's like nausea and disorientation at the same time, along with your stomach feels like you just don't have the nausea. You got like the horrible feeling when you think you got to shit all the time too.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you think it's going to come up and it's going to go down.
Oh man.
And then like, you got body aches, joint aches, just because nothing feels right.
It's like being hungover all the time.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's just like everything in your immune system is fighting. And it's like, all right, luckily, I mean, back then though, because when we didn't have kids, it was like, and I always say this, it's always going to be harder on the person you're with than you.
Yeah.
Because my wife had to watch me go through it. My parents had to watch me go through it. And there's nothing you can do. They just have to watch and hope the doctors are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And like, they're trying to comfort you and do things to comfort you to make sure that you're in less agony than you are. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that they can do. They can't take, like my dad always said that he wanted to be able to take away the pain because that's what you want to do for your kids. But he couldn't.
Yeah.
So he just had to watch it happen. And I'm sure as a parent, especially if it's your kid, regardless of the kid's age, that makes you feel utterly helpless.
Oh, yeah. Because you're supposed to be able to make your kids feel better.
Yeah.
It's like, job number one, like when they bump their head and they come and they, with my youngest, I just pretend to fix it. So like, I'll take the tools out, like the pretend drill, like, and he thinks it's great. Like, I replaced the part, dude.
Right.
It's either that or I cut it off. Like, you're good. You have a choice. And, but you can't do that with chemo.
Right. Yeah. Like, they got to go through that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's tough, man. Like, that's probably my biggest fear is something happening like that to one of the girls. And like, even if it happened to like one of our friends' kids, it still sucks because like a lot of your friends' kids, you were there when they came along.
Mm-hmm.
So not that they're your kids, but you do have a deep connection to these little kids.
Oh yeah.
And so I couldn't imagine, like it would just baffle my mind having to deal with something like that, regardless of the situation. But especially if you're the parents, like you're helpless at that point. Yeah.
But you have to take care of yourself because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of them.
Right. It's you put on your oxygen mask.
Yeah, the oxygen mask theory.
Yeah.
So, and that's when my dad was going through his with the now he did do a couple treatments. It was kind of closing the barn door after the horse got out at that point, but he never quit smoking because he's like
going out the way I want.
It's like, why am I going to be craving nicotine? And yeah, so I said, okay, I get it. Like, I'll give you that.
I got to go through cancer and nicotine withdrawal.
Yeah, no. F that. But it's. I lost my train of thought there. Damn it, it was good too. But
I don't know about you guys. Like the one thing, like you talked about getting, I don't want to say getting over it, but dealing with the grief and any of that stuff that comes along with it, the anxiety. Like music has always been something, like even just going for a drive, and I use it in the morning when I'm driving to work. I turn my music up as loud as I can and I sing at the top of my lungs because I'm the only one in the car, so it can't hurt anyone. But I don't know. I feel better after doing it and feel like I'm a little bit more alive, if you will, or woken up in the morning, awake. That's probably the right word to use.
Yeah, not woke. That's the
I've awoken. Yeah.
Music hits me. Music is my tier. Music will hit me. So like bagpipes get me. Certain hymns in church, especially when there's an organ and they hit some of those notes, get me. Some country songs do. I think there's a strong emotional connection to music. And after my father passed away, my mother gave me his car. It was a 2004 Ford Taurus. It wasn't anything special, but it was nice because it allowed us to get rid of one of our cars and get rid of a car payment and that sort of thing. So I forget who wrote the song. It was a country song. It's like, I drove your truck or I drive your truck. And it was about a guy who's, in the song, the person's father died and how he remembers him as he drives his truck.
It's not Alan Jackson, Daddy Let Me Drive, is it?
No, that's not it. That's not it. That's a good one too. That's with the old he talks about a boat too. But
yeah, that's when he was on the Chattahoochee looking for a hoochie coochie or something.
But so this song comes on and I'm in the car that my mom gave me that was my dad's car. And that song comes on, and granted, it's not a truck; it's a Ford Taurus. But I freaking lost it. It really got me. But it felt afterwards. It felt, it was to get that deep emotion out. Like it just needed that one trigger to get it out. So,
my trigger Subaru commercials.
Really,
those assholes.
Oh, with the kids surviving the crashes and all that?
So it's not just that. It's like the car gets passed down to the kid or the kid. I don't know. Whoever's doing the commercials over at Subaru, I fucking hate them, but they're amazing commercials because they hit me in the feels all the time. And I don't even own a Subaru. But like for what, like I'm about to tear up at a Subaru commercial. My wife's looking at me going, "What are you doing?" I go, "I don't know. It's just something about the Subaru commercial hits different." Now, Jeremy, and we'll end on this one. That last thing you said about the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So after my dad passed, now I had always been kind of anxious when it came to my own death. Like like thinking about how you're going to pass is always kind of giving me a little bit of anxiety. After my dad died, I feel like my anxiety about me dying went through the roof.
Really?
And I don't know why it is, but when I went to therapy, of course, the therapist was like, you can't control that, right? So why think about it? Like, I don't know. My brain thinks about it. What am I? Like, I understand the tools to not think about it, but I think about it. And sometimes, and again, this is when the unrational thoughts overpower the rational thoughts. I can't make it go away. So sometimes, and for me, it's weird. It happens mostly at night when it's quiet or I'm in bed or whatever's going on, or I don't know what it is, but basically it's like I have some severe anxiety, like I wouldn't say full blown panic attacks, but anxiety attack, right? About dying. Like, oh shit. And then of course the anxiety attack feels like you're gonna fucking die. Yeah. So it doesn't really help. It kind of snowballs it a little bit. Now luckily I've got some Xanax pills that I can kind of help take to kind of alleviate some of that. But I would like to not take the Xanax. You know what I'm saying? Like I would like to be able to control that spiral out of control. Yeah. But I don't know what it was, but as soon like after he passed, that's when it kind of just skyrocketed for me.
Well, my anxiety really started up after my mother died. Like she died in 2018 and 2019 is when it hit hard. And I think it's because there was no more, like I was it.
Right.
Like, you know, when you're in your 20s in college, you might call like, oh, hey, my car is broken. Can you help? And your parents are always there to help. And I know my mother would have sold a kidney to help one of her children. Like, no problem. But you're it. Like all of a sudden, like, crap, who do I call now? There's nobody to call. Right. Like, so it really hit hard then for me. You know, that anxieties. Now for me, what helped, because I've been thinking a lot of, so you probably remember it was almost 2 years ago when I had that GI stuff I couldn't figure out, and they're ordering colonoscopies and endoscopies and all this stuff. And then, you know, one of my idiot buddies was like, bro, one of my boys had back pain and then he had pancreatic cancer and died. And I was like, come on, man. Like this is one of my meathead gym buddies. Like, seriously, dude? Like, yeah, bro, he's like in great shape, but now he's dead. But thanks for telling the anxiety guy that. Yeah. So I started getting, you know, super into it. Like I'm still on these Facebook groups like Life After Death, and where people were putting pictures up like, is that him trying to contact me? Like, no, that's a moth. but it helps people, you know?
Yeah.
But I really got into like what happens. And so now it's almost like a curiosity, you know, like what's the next step? You know, and then another thing that helped me also was, you know, different strokes for different folks, but I found my way back to the church, which helped out as well. So, you know, that kind of said, okay, well, I'm in good hands, I guess.
I feel like church helps you let go. It allows you to let go of the responsibility to a higher power, right? Mm-hmm. If you can really believe, I think that's where it helps. I can't speak from experience, but it's that whole thing where someone else is there to help you,
mm-hmm.
right? Like I can call my dad to help me, whereas now he's not there. So who can I let go of some of the responsibility of life to?
Well, it's a weird thing for me because I'm not religious at all. And, you know, I know people that are in Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, all these different, you know, whatever, anything anonymous, I guess. And then you look at different walks of life and just kind of what people have gone through. And it's like, you know, I get it from that standpoint of like, you know, looking at something and not being able to give it up and feeling like you're pressed and up against it. But religion is the kind of the thing that's helped a lot of people out when they've hit rock bottom. It's why people find it in prison. It's why people find it when they're going through terrible medical situations like we talked about. There's even me not being religious. I think there's a lot of good things in religion that get you to focus on the right things and try to put you on the right path. I just think there's a lot of evil people in those positions of power.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And you can say that about any position of power, though, not just the church.
Yeah.
But they usually don't diddle kids. But that,
well, I mean, that's the first thing they go, what about the guys who diddle kids? Yeah, I get it. That's bad. That's not a good thing. But the person the pastor at my church isn't the one doing it. I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, I got news for you. Oh,
right. But you know, and it gets back to like, there's no atheists in foxholes. You know, and so you know, people go and they reach for something, and you know, for some people that might be religion. And I was brought up in, you know, going to church and doing all that. So, and I think knowing that my dad was probably, you know, I think he's on the path to becoming a deacon in the Episcopal Church. So that kind of brought me like a deeper connection to him. So, it kind of works out for me. Plus, if I had to go, my kids have to go. They're not getting out of it. So
I've always referred to myself. I've referred to myself as spiritual, but not religious.
Yeah.
So like I believe in a higher power, but I don't believe in an organized church.
Sure.
Because an organized church, there's room for corruption at the top and all that other stuff, right? Well, if you're spiritual, though, you can still believe in the higher power without having to deal with whatever the organization is.
Mm-hmm.
That's also probably a huge cop out. So, it could go either way.
You just want to get up early on Sundays.
That is also true. I don't do mornings.
No,
it's tough enough for me to get up and get my kid to school. Although, because if I didn't have to get her to school, I'd be sleeping till about noon. I'll stay up until 2 a.m. But if you got to get me up in the morning, forget it. But I think it's good, especially for 3 guys to talk about this, because women we'll talk about this on a podcast they'll do a whole series on this shit. But there's no other podcast out there with 3 guys that will open themselves up and talk about this, even though other guys are going through this. So I think it's important, especially like when we were talking about mental health, I think it's important for guys to talk about mental health. Let's talk about how you go through the grieving process, because one thing, like someone who's going to listen to this is going to realize, oh wait, I've been grieving in the same way that you are, or I grieve in the same way that Mike does, or I grieve in the same way that Jeremy does, or I grieve in the same way that Alex does. And there isn't one way to do it, and it's okay to do it in any way that you do, as long as you're not, going to do something horrible. But there's nowhere else that talks about this kind of stuff. So, hopefully people that are listening to this, I think the title of it's going to be the grief episode or something. I'm going to make sure the word grief is in the title, which probably won't get any clicks whatsoever. But
that's what I want to listen to when I'm doing cardio.
Right. Maybe I should say Trump grieves something. Maybe if I put Trump's name in it, maybe it'll get some more clicks.
Just put the Charlie Brown episode. Good grief. Yeah, that's all.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that's not a bad way. I wonder if we get sued for that if we use good grief. Is that trademark?
I don't know if you can trademark good grief.
Probably not. I think we just found the episode.
Yeah. But I think it's also good to hear 3 different ways of how people handled it. Because like when my dad, my grandparents passed away, when I was a kid. I only knew 3 of them. My mom's father passed away before I was born. So, and but you're a kid, you're not, I was in high school for all 3 of them. And then as an adult and with someone that close, one of your immediate family members passed away, like, how do you act? And I thought there was something wrong with me because I wasn't like sobbing and wailing and all this stuff. And, maybe someone will hear this say, okay, well, I didn't wail either. I got down to business, or I did, or I had anxiety, or whatever how they handle it. Maybe they'll hear one of our perspectives and think, oh, okay, well, this other dude handled it the same way I did. So I'm not because I thought I was heartless at first because I wasn't wailing and crying and all this stuff. But I was like, man, I must be fucked up.
And you also might not grieve the same way the next time. So like when my uncle passed, I'd say about 15 years ago, I cried at that funeral.
Mm-hmm.
At my dad's, I didn't cry, but I was like, I felt I had to be there for my mom. If I cried, she was going to cry. Right. So I think there's different ways, even though they're the same person, you might grieve a different way for a different person each time. So who knows? But hopefully people get some value out of this. Maybe luckily we were able to laugh through it quite a bit, which is what we try to get some laughter out of some serious topics when we talk about it. So we appreciate you listening. I want to thank Jeremy for coming on, and we will see you guys next week.
Can I put my pants back on?